Hi everybody, I'm Joel Stoner. This is the music room of my house, and as you can tell, it's got a little bit of a reverb problem. A couple reasons for that. One is it's a fairly big space. I'm going to grab the tripod here and walk around a little bit. And you can see that adjoining the music room is the dining room. Beyond that is the kitchen. And if you go out there, walk through the kitchen, you can actually come back here. So if you were sound, you would go out there, come back about a second later and be reverb. So that's part of the problem. Steps upstairs are trapping some sound, and then also can go into my office, which sometimes doubles as a control room, and then comes right back into the music room here. So that's the problem. So what do we do about it? Obviously some sound panels or acoustic panels would be the thing to do, but I want to keep the aesthetic of my house. I don't want it to look like a recording studio, live room, even though sometimes that's what it is. And there's a lot of treatment that needs to get done here, but I don't want it to look like a recording studio. First thing I'm going to do is probably put a curtain up on that door to the kitchen. And just to cover it, this is not soundproofing, this is acoustic treatment. I want to fix the sound in here. I'm not going to try to prevent inside sound from going out or outside sound from coming in. This is just to make this a playable room. So my strategy is to start with this wall back here. Go up a step here so you can see it. And what I'm going to do is build some wooden panels. This is backwards. Right here and right here. Right here. It's backwards. And fill it with insulation. The one insulation I'm going to use is called rock wool. It's 2 inches thick by 2 feet by 4 feet. Each panel will have some of that in there covered by fabric. Nice fabric on the outside, and then some utility fabric on the back to keep it from going in. Disclaimer, I'm not an expert. I'm an ex-recording engineer and I'm handy in the shop, but I've not done any acoustic measurements. I'm not an acoustician by any means. I'm just going to try to make this problem go away. So I mentioned I've already built 2 of the panels, and I'm going to bring those in, show you how they look, and then we'll go out to the shop and see how we build it. Okay, so there I've got the 2 panels in place, frames, I should say. And there's gonna be 2 pieces of insulation in each one of those squares. And it's not obvious, so I'll just show that this is, one panel over here, and then that's another one over here. Frame, I should keep saying frame. So a couple things. This wall here is taller than 8 feet, it's 8.5 feet. So these 1x3s, they come in 8-foot lengths. So I had to decide, do I want to go to the trouble of figuring out how to get floor to ceiling, or do I want to do something clever? And that's what I chose to do. So let me see if I can get this down here. What I'm just temporarily doing, is putting them on some 4x6 blocks, just to show you how they're going to sit. So what I wanted to do was have them sit above the floorboards, and also above the ground, so that I could hide wires underneath it, or vacuum underneath it there. I didn't want the vacuum to be bumping into the bottom of the acoustic panel, get it all dented or whatever. So anyway, that's the start. And just to kind of zoom in a little bit here, you can see that each corner has little angle bracelets in there. Angle bracelets. Each corner has angle irons in there to help with the structure and strength. And we'll go out in the shop in a minute and show you how I built some of those. All right, so now we're out in my pretty messy shop. Sorry about that. And I thought I'd just talk about tools first. Okay, so since we're making frames, basically, it's really important that they be made square. So this is a squaring clamp, and you can take 2 pieces of wood, put them like this, make sure they're square, clamp them down, and then you take your nail gun. So I'm being loose about it now because I'm holding the camera, but basically you get those square, then you take your nail gun, go boop, 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 and then you've got a nice square piece. So obviously that means we need a nail gun. I got this at Harbor Freight. Oops, there goes the other nail gun. So this is the stapler down here. There's a nail gun. They're 20 to 40 bucks each, totally worth it if you're going to do a lot of work. Obviously, here are some squares. This is a big one, and this is a little one that's great for helping to make square cuts with. And then clamps. You're going to want a couple clamps just to hold stuff for you. And obviously, I've got all that sitting on the 1x3s in question. Now, when we talk about wood, you know, if you go look at a 2x4, it's not really 2 inches by 4 inches, it's 1.5 by 3.5. A 1x3 is really 3/4 of an inch by 2.5 inches. So even though it comes in 2.5 inch pieces, because that insulation over there in the corner is 2 inches, what I've done for a lot of this wood so far is ripped it so that I'm cutting off basically a 1/2 inch strip, which I'm going to use later. So I'll show you how I rip it over here on the table saw. So here I've got it set up with a 1/2 inch of space between the blade and the guide. And so I just push the 1x3s through there to turn them into 1 by 2 inches, or really 3/4 by 2 inches. And then for doing length, this is the chop saw. So you can get away with not having one quite this elaborate. You could use a hand saw or a circular saw, but I'd recommend getting one of these if you're going to be doing any kind of woodwork. It definitely helps things out a little bit. All right, so what I'm going to do next is rip one of these 1x3s. Now, when you buy a bunch of 1x3s, you want to look through them, give them all a good once-over visually. You want to make sure that your longest pieces are the least warped or bent. So this one is pretty good, and I'm going to go ahead and start up the saw, and I can just shove it through. And obviously, you want to do all the ripping kind of at the same time. So once your saw is set up with the dimension, you can do all the wood that way. I'm only going to do one for your entertaining pleasure. Entertainment pleasure? I'll go ahead and do the rest of the pieces, and you guys can do something else. I'll be right back. Okay, so now I've got the ripped down 1x3s, the now 3/4 by 2 inch pieces. And I've got 4 of them put together. These are going to be the long pieces. And I've got them clamped down here, resting on my sander. I've got a level here to make sure that it's level. And a clamp here to hold it tight, and this clamp is holding it to the saw itself, so it's not going to move around. And I don't know if you can see it from there, but the ends, even though they call them 8 foot, they're not really exactly 8 feet. They're usually like 8.5 feet, some longer, some shorter. So before we start measuring each one, we want to give them all the same end. So I'm just going to buzz off the end of this here. Now I've got a nice clean end on all of them. So the 2 panels that I'm making next are the one that's going to fit underneath the window and the one that's going to fit on top of the window. So the window is 70 3/8 inches. So I need 4 1x3s, 2 for the bottom, 2 for the top, all at the exact same length. So I've got these 4 clamped together again still, and I've got it measured out here with the tape measure at 70 3/8. So let me pull this back. Get my little square out of the way. And I've got this lined up right underneath the saw here. So I'm just going to rip it. Here we go. No longer needed. We'll use these for something else. Here are my 4 pieces that are exactly the same length and width. Now, we might assume that our house is built perfectly, but it turns out that the window that I'm building these pieces to go below and above is not in their level. So on one side, I need the panel to be 35.5 inches and the other side 36. So I'm going to cut 2 different sized pieces so that they'll fit nicely underneath my unlevel window. Don't assume your house is square. Here we go. So I've got the first one measured. I'll go ahead and cut that, measure the other one in high-speed motion. That's how unlevel my 70 3/8 inch window is mounted in my house. All right, so I've got the 4 pieces that I've cut so far laid out, and you can see I've got each one of them, each corner clamped. That's the big clamp, and then I've also got some smaller clamps. This is the corner clamps. And even though this is technically not going to be square, because the two ends are different lengths. I can still kind of mock them up in these square things just to hold it together while I staple it. So now that's laid out on the floor and everything theoretically squared up, I'm going to go ahead and use the nail gun to start putting it together. Okay, next step is to put some angle irons in each corner, just for some additional strength. Okay, so the wall under the window is where this panel is going. And on that wall there is an AC outlet, which I want to be able to have access to through this panel. So I need to frame out a frame around the AC outlet so that I can get it and also still staple fabric to it so that'll work. So I've got two pieces in there just loosely fitted, and I'm going to take this piece inside, temporarily put it up on the wall, and then space out where these pieces should go exactly, and then I'll come out here and nail them again. Okay, so there's the piece we just made, and if I zoom in a little bit, you can see there's the AC outlet, and so these vertical parts right here are just going to allow me to put the fabric tightly around the AC outlet, and I've loosely marked them up here where they need to join, and down there. Okay, so here's the same frame again. I've got it standing vertically now, and just to make it easy, I've clamped in those two pieces, and then I'm going to go ahead and nail them in place. Once you use a nail gun, you'll never not want to use a nail gun. So awesome, so easy. Get a compressor and a nail gun. You'll be happy. Okay, so in light of the recent discovery that the window is actually not square, I've decided I want to do a dry practice run mount of the frames before I screw the fabric on, because I want to make sure that the skewing is all going to work out before I put the fabric on, in case I have to rebuild something afterwards. But before I put the fabric on, before I do the mount, before I do the fabric, I want to sand some of the frames, because at some of these spots where the wood joins, it's just a little rough. And also around the corners. I just want to make sure any of the wood that's going to be touching the fabric is smooth. What I want to make sure not to do, though, is round off the corners on the edges here. I still want these to be nice and crisp. Sometimes when you sand things, you'll get a rounded edge, and I don't want that. So I'm just going to do these corners, any edges where the fabric's touching that's not quite perfectly smooth. So here we go with that. I think I mentioned this on an earlier video, but this piece is the one that's going underneath the window, and there is an AC outlet underneath the window. So this little frame here is so that I can basically frame out where that outlet is going to go and wrap the fabric around this little frame here. I'm going to position those once I get it all in place inside. Hey there. So it's been actually about 4 months since the last segment, and if you're paying attention, you'll notice that the back walls are actually up. And if you're really paying attention, you'll notice there's some microphones there on the drums and also on the piano. So what happened is I got the new interface for my computer, the ProSonus Quantum 2626, and some microphones, which I put up, and of course I recorded something right away, and it was so echoey in here that it was kind of unusual. And so I was very eager to get the panels up, and so I went ahead and finished them without doing this video part of it. So I felt bad and wanted to finish that up. And I do have one little narrow piece of wall panel there to finish. So I thought we could do that together so I can show you how I stuff it with the rock wall, put the back fabric on the front fabric, and affix it to the wall. So I thought we'd take a closer look at what I've done in the background, and then we'll get into the shop and finish that last piece. But listen, it's so much better than it was before. And once I get that last piece up, I'll play a little clip of what I recorded before the wall panels were up, and then another one afterwards with them. And I think you'll see a big difference. So let's go take a look. So in our last segment, I was talking about drilling the holes through the side panels, and there you can see the final result of that. I drilled the holes before the fabric was on because I wanted to make sure that, you know, if I drilled the hole after the fabric, that the bit wouldn't chew up the fabric and that, you know, that kind of thing. So also you'll see that within the screw, here's the screw itself. I used these Everbuilt number 8 finishing washers, which have this little kind of countersink in them. I hope you can see that. And so that gives a nice little external finish to the screw. Once it's in there, it looks kind of like that. So that's that. So for these tall ones, I only screwed them in on the top, and then we'll go down to the bottom on this one over here. And we'll see I've basically got, you know, the same things there on the bottom. And here is where I cut a hole for the power. I didn't do that as well as I would like to have. You can still see the staples there, but at least we can get to it. For the top and bottom of the window, I couldn't really put the screws in this way because I would really just be driving it into drywall. So what I did is I put a cleat underneath inside and went down. And these screws are actually driving into the cleat that is affixed to the wall rather than the wall itself. So I've got a cleat on the top one here, and I've got it on the bottom of the top piece over there. And I didn't mention it, but across the top, the screws are driving straight into the 2x4 header. It's across the top of the room there, and the same on the bottom. And there you can see behind the drums, there's another little hole for the power. And what we're gonna do right now is go out to the shop and build the piece that will fit right in there. So stand by for that. I think I've already shown how to build the frame, so I'm gonna go ahead and build the narrow little frame, and then I'll come back once that's done and we'll get into the other stuff. Be right back. All right, so here is the frame. So I'm gonna take this inside. We'll do a dry fit before we put all the fabric on it. All right, so here we are inside, and I'm just gonna put this up here. I've marked at the top so I know where the top is. And there it is. So even though I measured down at the bottom, turns out that the wall goes in even further than I expected. So I think it'll fit, but what I'm gonna do is just sand off the bottom left side so that we'll go in a little bit easier, because I gotta leave some room for the fabric and all that stuff too. But there it is, and we can see how that works. And what I'm gonna do, now that I fit it in, I think I only really need one, well, I guess I have to do 2 screws at the top. You can't see it. 2 screws at the top and 2 at the bottom. I think is all I'm gonna need. So let's head back out to the shop and we'll do rock wool, the back fabric, and the front fabric. All right, so I've kind of shaved this down a little bit, so that should be a little better at the bottom. And I also just, as you see, took a round of the sander on the front and sides so it won't catch fabric. And one other note is on the larger pieces, I put little angle irons in each of the corners. Because this is much smaller and lighter piece, once it's up, it's just going to be there and screwed in. It doesn't really need the angle irons. So if you're wondering why I left that out, that's why. Okay, so I'm going to reset and we'll get into the backing fabric first. All right, so what I have here is some landscape fabric. It's designed to be durable, of course. It's designed to go underneath mulch in your garden so it won't rot. And it also lets some sound through, which is good. Hello. And so I'm just going to lay this out. I'll cut it to fit. And then I will staple it in high-speed mode. Oh, the other reason I'm using it is I saw a video where another guy who was making sound panels used this stuff, so that's why I'm using it. So here we go, I'm going to lay it out. All right, so I've got it laid out, and you might have noticed I cut it quite a bit bigger. I've been going back and forth on the idea of should this back fabric wrap around to the front to kind of smooth out any inconsistencies in the wood. I've been going back and forth on that. I think I will do that this time. The other thing I wanted to mention was the reason we have the back fabric is so that it will keep the insulation in when we move it around, and also keep any dust from the insulation out from touching the wall. So it's just makes it into a neater package. I can carry this thing around when it's done, the insulation won't fall out. It's a nice package. So here is a air compressor stapler. Same thing as if you had a staple gun. Uses these Arrow T150 staples. I'm using a 3/8 inch length, so you can see what that is. And once you use an air gun stapler, you'll never want to use the old kind ever again. So I'm going to go ahead and start stapling, and we'll come back. So I've got to also stretch it out. So I'm going to kind of nail one side, then I'm going to come back and stretch the other side. We'll go from there. One other thing about stapling is you want the air pressure to be not too high, because if the air pressure is too high, it's going to jam the staple too far down in and cause a little bit of a kink in the fabric. So my pressure is too high right now. I'm going to go lower that. All right, so I had the air pressure turned up to about 90 psi for when I was doing the nailing. You need the pressure. Now that I'm doing the stapling, I'm only going in 3/8 of an inch, so I don't need that much. So I've got about 45 psi right now. Pounds per square inch. Okay, sorry, two more things. I turned the pressure too low, so it wasn't stapling in, but before I figured that out, you're also supposed to oil these things. So what I just did there off camera was I got the little thing of oil that comes with it, just drop or two in the intake, air intake, and we should be back in business with some higher pressure. All right, so that's the initial part of it, and it doesn't have to be perfect because nobody's going to see it. The real purpose, again, of this is just to keep the insulation in. So flip it over, and I'm going to go ahead with the idea of doing this around the front. And I want to stay away from the corners because I'm going to come back and do them a little bit more surgically. Right now, I'm just getting attached.
So what I'm doing here is just cutting the corners. There's a bunch of ways you can do this, of course. I think the way you would do it if it were a gift is not actually appropriate for this, because you're going to get too much buildup on the corner, and we're going to have another layer of fabric on this, so we don't want to have that annoying buildup. So I'm going to go ahead and just put these in there like that. And of course, again, this piece is hidden, so it doesn't have to be too beautiful. Something like that. All right, so here we have, I have to say this is not my best work. The other ones actually came out better. But of course I'm doing this on camera, so it's a little messy, but it doesn't matter. So what we're gonna do next is get the insulation, and we'll cut it to fit in here, and then we'll lay the fabric on top. All right, so this rock wool stuff comes in a giant kind of bale or bundle of like this. It's 24 inches wide, 48 inches long, and there's 12 of them in this big bale. And this is what it looks like as a whole piece. Now I could cut some to fit exactly, but I happen to have, excuse me, some leftover scraps from the other panels that I've made, and these don't fit exactly, but I think they fit close enough, especially for this corner. You know, I don't really need to spare the extra inch or fill that extra inch, so I'm just going to go with this. It's a little sloppy, forgive me. Now to cut this stuff, the recommended tool is a electric meat slicer. So I actually have one of these out in my shop because I've done a fair amount of projects with foam, and you can use these things for that too. So here's my electric meat slicer. Now once you've used one of these for shop work, don't go slicing your roast beef with it. That would be gross. So I'm just gonna real loosely kind of grab this guy. Nice and easy. Now if I wanted to be extra careful, you know, since you guys are watching, I'll go ahead and cut some narrow slices here. That didn't work as well as I thought. There. You can also just kind of break it with your hands. So there, got a pretty decent filling going on there. And so point being, you don't have to get too exact. The only thing you do want to be careful of is that you don't have the rock wool insulation hanging out over the edge, because that would make a bump in what's going to be the forward-facing surface. And so here's one of the advantages of what I was talking about earlier, of leaving this backing fabric or having it wrap all the way around, is that I can kind of use it to make sure that the rock wool is not peeking out, or if it is, that it'll get, you know, kind of shoved back in a nice way. Okay, next up is fabric. Let me clean this up and we'll come back and talk about fabric. Okay, before fabric, I mentioned earlier that I drilled the screw holes in the frame before I put the fabric on. I haven't done that yet, so I'm going to do that now. So we want to drill from the front back, and I'm just going to be kind of casual about it. I don't really, I do this kind of thing by eye rather than specific measurements. So I also said I was going to go get a longer bit. I don't know if you can see that, but that's a longer bit. So I'm going to go down here, just get it right. Okay, so there's the holes. Once I put the fabric on, I'll be able to feel through the fabric where the hole is, and I can just poke the screw into that. And by the way, the bit that I'm using is bigger than the thread of the screw. So the screw will just go right into it. I don't want the screw to bind with the frame. I just want it to slip through and let this be where all the power is. Let's see, so yeah, I want to blow off the table to get rid of all this sawdust. This is almost my favorite one. Since we're going to be putting our good fabric on here next, I don't want all this sawdust. I'll be right back with the fabric. Okay, so fabric. Here it is. This is what we picked. This is a fabric that I highly recommend. I went to pretty much every fabric store in LA to find something that was good, and came a lot of things very close. Finally, I went to a place called LA Sound Panels, and they make sound panels, but I opted to build my own. But they also sell the fabric, and they also sell the rock wool, so I went there to get those two things. And they recommended this fabric, and they were right. This stuff is awesome. It's way better than anything you'll get anywhere else. It's a little more expensive, but it's worth it, trust me. And so this is, you can buy this directly from the manufacturer, which is Guilford of Maine, GUILFORDOFMAINE, state.com. And I'll probably put that URL in the video. What's great about it is it's very durable. It's also just stretchy enough so that you can stretch it tight without any wrinkles, but it's not too stretchy. It's thick, you can't see through it, but it does let sound through. It's actually acoustic fabric, so this is what it's designed to do. So use this. I'll try to find the exact model and color in case you like this, but it comes in a bunch of different colors and patterns. Oh, I would recommend not doing a pattern fabric because in this case, this is a scrap that I have, and in another piece that I did, the one under the window, I had to rotate the scrap that I was using, which wouldn't work if it had a pattern on it. The other thing that's great about this fabric is it is the same on both sides, so it doesn't matter what side you put it on, which makes it really easy. So very lucky that this scrap is fitting. I'm going to go ahead and lay it out. Okay, so we're all laid out, and this is, I talked earlier about start stapling from the middle and work out, and probably makes more sense here, where if I started to staple up here at this end, and I kept stretching the fabric, it would, it'd be weird. So I'm gonna kind of lay my claim here in the middle, and then move towards you, and then I'll come back and move towards there, and then we'll save the corners for last. So here I go with my handy staple gun. Watch how fast I can do this. Oh, one more thing I forgot to mention is the top piece that I put above the window, the fabric that I have there just barely fit. If you snuck a peek at the top of that piece of wood, you would see that some of the wood was exposed. And that's okay, because nobody's ever going to climb up a ladder and look there. This one will just barely fit around both sides. But it's the same situation where this side is going to be facing the other panel, and this side will be facing the corner. So technically I don't even really need it on the corners, but I'll have it there. And I'm probably not going to do the full wrap around just because it won't fit. So here we go, starting roughly in the middle. Okay, so what I was just saying there was actually not quite right. The window is right here. And so I do want this edge to have a very nice fabric edge. It's this edge that's a little bit less important. So
what I'm going to do is take the good edge of the fabric, not the one I hacked away at, and I'm going to put that over here. And in this case, I'm going to feel okay about flipping this over because it's a very narrow piece, and that the rock wool is not going to fall out. But on those bigger panels, I wouldn't be able to do this because the rock wool would fall out. But because this is kind of short, I'm going to go ahead and do this, and I'm going to make sure that I've got just enough fabric to wrap it around the back here. I'm going to do all this, and then I'll be able to stretch it from the other side. So just getting this kind of roughed in place. Make sure I can get it all here. Yeah, there we go. I'm going to put a little bit more staples into this real fabric than I did the backing fabric. And for each one, I'm pulling it just a little bit taut. These staples, I'm putting about 2 inches apart. I've gone through 2 boxes of these, by the way. Well, I guess a box and a half at this point. I was about to say when the generator came on, that I'm putting these about 2 or 3 inches apart, and the other fabric was more like 4 or 5 inches apart. So let's reload this guy here. By the way, the other great thing about this fabric is it cleans very easily, so I can use my little blower. All this leftover stuff is gonna just blow right off. I want to make sure that it's clean. All the no bumps going on. And so this edge, as I was just saying, is going to be the one that faces the wall. This is the window here. So that window edge looks really nice, I hope. And I can start to just make this one nice and tight. Another reason for not getting a pattern on your fabric is you're stretching it, and you don't want the pattern to get kind of skewed out or whatever. I'm going to do a rough cut. Again, this is the top or the bottom, I forget. But nobody's going to look at it, so I can staple here. And I'm pulling it tight. So I'm just going to tack some of these down so it doesn't flap around too much while I'm working with it, or while I'm trying to mount it. Okay, so now I got to think about the corners, and I have to confess I'm not a master of the corners yet. And this is the window side, so that means this is the top, and the corner that's going to be most visible to people, most noticeable, most observed, is this corner. So I'm going to try to figure out what the coolest thing to do here is. And again, nobody's going to be seeing the top, so I think what I want to do is come down and make sure that the piece that everybody will see, oops, I didn't do that quite right. All right, I got to take a couple staples out. Happens to the best of us. Chisel. Chisel's a good tool for this. As I was saying earlier, you don't want too much buildup on the back of this, because then that's going to
make it a little bit stiff or awkward when you're trying to mount it to the wall. So I'm just getting rid of as much excess. Again, corner's not my best skill, but that's okay because nobody's going to see these. Earlier in the video, I talked about how the other panels were held on with a cleat above and below the window. And so basically that was a piece of wood that I fastened to the wall. Let's just pretend this is it. And then I also cut a slit in the backing fabric so the cleat would fit in. And then I drilled down into that. So ignore these holes, but that's what the cleat was. All right, I'm gonna go do the bottom. If I were doing this professionally, I would have to be a little better at the corners, but I only have to please me, so it's good enough. So, all right, what we have here is essentially a finished skinny sound panel to go in the corner. So, obviously I was blowing that off. The generator was on, so you probably couldn't hear me. So I just used my fingers to feel where those holes were, and I'm going to have to get those finishing washers on here, but I just wanted to get the screw in roughly the right place, so they can be kind of hard to... All right, we are ready to move inside. Panel done. All right, so I'm inside now, and I've got these little washers that I've been talking about. And I just want to swap or get them on there. So just real quick. And again, these screws don't have any bite in this frame, which is intentional. That way they won't buckle up when I'm trying to screw them into the wall. All right, so I've just got it kind of roughed in place. We're not roughed in place yet. I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And it's fairly firm and tight. So I can actually just put it in place and screw it in. What do you think? Not too bad. Again, keeping in mind, the piece is not square because the house is not square. And fortunately it fits in there. Project done. Next, I'm going to play a little audio of what it sounded like before and a little audio of what it sounds like now. Hopefully it'll be worth it. It's a little better. Okay, one more thing, two more things. The other thing that I did, a little less dramatic, is install this curtain that goes from the music room and the dining room into the kitchen. And that actually goes all the way around to the hallway from the front door and back in. So this is acoustic fabric, a special acoustic curtain, like $200, a little more than I wanted to spend, but sometimes you got to. And then if I go all the way around here, here is another one. Okay, so now by closing these two curtains, I've at least reduced to an extent echo that's going to go out from, you're all getting dizzy, sorry about that. So that is now a closed thing, and down the hall, that's the backside of the same, of a black curtain as well, to minimize that sound. All right, so here I am in my home office control room. What we're looking at here is a logic file of me playing the drums starting at bar 33 before the panels and curtains went up, and then also starting at 49 after the panels and curtains went up. And so this is essentially mic to tape. There's no EQ compression gates or any space reverb, either recording or playback. So we can get a pretty good comparison. Let's take a listen.
All right, so obviously there's a lot of room in there. This is just the overheads. A lot of stuff splashing around. You know, if you were looking for this sound, it would be okay, but you're kind of stuck with it after you record it. So here's starting 49 with the panels and curtains. Obviously a much cleaner sound. Here is just the overheads. Much more manageable. Okay, so no judgment on the drumming. I'm not a professional drummer. But I think I achieved what I was looking for, which was to just clean up the room a lot, so you could either have a performance there or a recording that was usable. I might want to do a little bit more sound absorption in there to pick up just what's left. I could, you know, in emergency, just put some blankets on the floor. It's a hardwood floor, so that's very reflective. But job done, I would say. If you have any questions, please let me know. You can reach out at joel@joelstoner.com, and I guess I'm supposed to say like and subscribe below. Anyway, hope you liked it. Talk soon.